Hi everybody, my name is Mary Jane Kennefick and I've been a member here in Sundayswell for 37 years. I am currently a trustee of the club with Valerie Noonan and Michael Buckley. In this, our 125-year anniversary, we thought we should look back at one particular aspect of our club, the position of women over the lifetime of Sundayswell. My connection with this fantastic place goes back much more than 37 years, right back, in fact, to almost the beginning. A man named George Crosby was chairman here for 10 years, from 1906 to 1916. Another man, Freddie Lyons, was tennis captain from 1907 to 1921. At the time, Sundayswell was very much a men's club, where they came to meet each other while their wives were safely at home. The son of George Crosby, also George, married the daughter of Freddie Lyons, called Maureen, when she was only 17 years old, and I am their granddaughter. They quickly had 3 children, and it was only after that she took up tennis seriously with her sister Anita. She loved her tennis, but was not allowed into this building, as the clubhouse was for members only, and women were not members. She was allowed to play at certain times on the lower courts only, change and have refreshments down in the steward's house beside Court 8. There were, of course, at the time, no showers. In those early days of the club, tennis was very much a summer game only. Women played in long dresses and large hats to keep the sun off their faces. But my grandmother was hooked and played tennis throughout the summer and hockey in the winter, even when she had 4 children. On special days during the tennis season, tea parties were organised to include the men, when the ladies had their best china brought over to the club and had their cooks produce their best baking. She assured me that there was quite a lot of competition between these cooks. They all sat and took tea on the veranda on these afternoons. I asked her what happened when it rained. She laughed and said, "I suppose the women put up their parasols and the men disappeared into the bar." Actually, back in 1901, the issue of female membership was discussed at committee level, but nothing came of it, and women were outwardly at least content to accept the status quo. As time went on, the hats got smaller, the skirts a little shorter, and tennis became easier for women to play. My grandmother assured me that women were just as competitive back then as we are now, and she recalled some great games with her sister against the renowned Marjorie Horton and her partners. The Horton family was the club's most illustrious, with the prowess of Ben Horton and his son Alan. But Ben's sister Marjorie was no slouch either, and she and Ben got to the mixed doubles quarterfinals at Wimbledon in 1922 and were mixed doubles champions at the Irish Doubles Championships in 1921 and 1923. My grandmother's tennis reached a peak in 1931 when she and her sister beat Marjorie and her partner in the Munster Senior Championships. That was the first time that she had ever played on the front courts. Her tennis in the well came to a stop when she was transported to Rushbrook in 1939, when her husband was in charge of the Irish Navy down there during the Second World War. And she only returned to her beloved Sundayswell after the war. During and after the war, Sundayswell suffered as a club. Membership had never been very high, and it was a very lean time in Ireland in the 1950s and the 1960s. The late Mossy Flynn recalled not having to book a court on a Saturday, and often being on the only occupied court on a Saturday afternoon. Throughout the following decades, members' significant others, presumably wives and daughters, were encouraged to play on certain days and at particular times, but were still not allowed into the clubhouse. Sunday's Well was still very much a men's club. Eventually, the ladies' dressing room moved from behind Court 8 to a very small area upstairs where the club offices now are, accessed by what can only be described as a ladder, rather than a stairs, and the two showers there left a lot to be desired. Again, in the 1950s, a long time after it was first discussed, it was suggested that ladies could be admitted as associate members, mainly as a way of boosting the club's finances. However, the chairman at the time was of the opinion that giving women full use of club facilities would lead to, and I quote, undesirable demand for the use of the bar. I'm not sure what this tells us about the drinking habits of women at the time. In the 1960s, when there were only 45 members on the books, it was finally agreed to admit ladies as associate members, both to raise the membership and the club's finances, and because some younger men wanted women in the club. Mary Kerwin, then Delaney, was a visitor to the club from 1953 onwards, playing in the junior tournament. She comments that she loved Sunday's Well and always felt welcomed. So the Delaney sisters had no hesitation in availing of membership when it became available to them. Of course, there were a few provisos. Associate members had to be over 18. They had to be of tournament standard, they couldn't play on a Sunday morning, and they could only use the club on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. However, within a short time, 29 female members had joined. Even then, one of the courts in front of the clubhouse was constantly reserved for full members, i.e. for men. However, the women interviewed in our 125-year celebrations agreed that despite the restrictions, the club grew into a fantastic place to be in the 1960s, 70s and 80s. When Imelda Murphy joined in 1970, she noted that while the club retained an air of an old-fashioned gentleman's hideaway, it was still a lovely place to be. The fire was lit daily, and newspapers and magazines were available in the reading room. The women worked together to offer catering for visiting teams, for Open Week and Close Week, a tournament which, incidentally, was introduced by Imelda's husband, Matt. The women said there were frequent musical evenings and fun evenings, and social tennis was very popular. Finance, however, was critical. The committee took a brave decision to build 2 squash courts in the 1970s, a game which had grown in popularity, and even women were encouraged to play up to 5 p.m, with good women players allowed to book courts after work. The squash courts were a great success and turned the club's finances around. Discussions took place constantly around the rights of women associate members, but it was not until 1994, and despite some opposition, that women could apply for full membership. Immediately, women could hold office, sit on the General Committee and vote at the AGM. What a change that brought about for our club. I was very honoured to have been elected the first woman captain in 1997. I was nervous too, of course, as there was a kind of aura of secrecy around what happened in the Holy of Holies of the General Committee. But I couldn't say no. The club had waited since 1899 for its first female captain, and my grandmother would have been very proud. I needn't have worried. I found the committee to be entirely supportive. The three trustees at the time, Gordon Eggshaw, Spike O'Sullivan, and Tom Murray, would each keep me a seat beside them in my first few months. I had to sort that one out in time, as one of them was a chain smoker. Thankfully, Alice Fawcett was the first woman elected at AGM to the committee, so I was not up there on my own. Since then, we have had a whole host of excellent lady captains and committee members, and the club has been transformed. Women have played and represented the club at the highest level over the years, with many more since the introduction of veterans tennis. Kay Stanton had been the mainstay of veterans tennis in Sunday's-Well, at Munster and at Irish level, and has done so much over the years to promote it. The first Veterans Interprovincial was held here in Sunday's-Well back in 1986. And in 1991, the late Alice McCarthy was our first lady vet to play for Ireland. Kay sat on tennis committees, organised and ran numerous tournaments, served 2 terms as Munster branch president, and was president of Tennis Ireland in 1996. She says she also spent a lot of time in the club's very tiny kitchen. The club has actually had 6 presidents of Tennis Ireland over the years, and 2 of them, Rhoda McAuliffe and Kay Stanton, have been women. There wasn't a whole lot of junior coaching in the early or even middle years of the club. Many members would have preferred, in fact, not to see juniors here at all. Dr. Jim O'Neill enlisted the help of Greg Morris to get junior tennis up and running back in the 1960s. The mantle was taken up by Niall Coffey and Mary Kerwin, who rode in behind them. Eventually, after a lot of work, they got permission to coach the children of members on a Saturday morning. The children of those early juniors, and now their grandchildren, are in many cases our members of today. The numbers playing tennis grew as our membership grew, but it was not until the 1990s that Ger Flynn, Marie Duffy and Greg Morris came together with the club committee to formulate junior tennis in the club, and have, with a procession of assistant coaches, done an amazing job. Junior tennis has gone from strength to strength, thanks to Ger, Marie, Greg, and all the ladies and men who coached and served on the junior committee over the years. For many years now, the club has supported Parks Tennis, and here I have to mention Catherine Murphy, who has been at its helm for over 25 years. In that time, many kids from disadvantaged backgrounds have had the chance to fall in love with tennis. My grandmother would be very happy with women's progress in the club were she here today. Years ago, she was amazed that we could play all year round and on all weather floodlit courts. Not just amazed, but quite envious also. The last hurdle for women in Sunday's-Well was jumped when Valerie Noonan became club treasurer, club chairman, and is now a trustee. Claire Fennell followed her, did 2 years as captain, treasurer, and club chairman. Tennis has grown exponentially in recent years with long waiting lists in all clubs. Tennis is now a very popular game, as can be seen by the scrum to gain entry to our clubs and to our tournaments in the province. Curiously, in 1922, there was a waiting list for membership here in Sunday's but I can't imagine that it compares with the one we have at the moment. Another thing that has changed, of course, is what we wear on court. We've pretty much lost the battle to wear all white. I think my grandmother would not approve of this one. In the many years that I ran Open Week with a box of pens and a highlighter, no computer then, it was often a battle to get people to wear all white on court. The late Declan Healy, who often acted as referee, had a good way of dealing with the problem. If the offending player lost and his tournament was run, he wished him well and looked forward to next year. However, if they won, he had a quiet word about whites being available in the clubhouse. On another occasion, when Mary Kerwin was referee, on a brilliantly hot June week, the visiting ranked players, who were so important to the status of our tournament at the time, refused to play on the sandy AstroTurf unless they could wear AstroTurf shoes because of the danger of slipping. However, AstroTurf shoes were new in our lives and only came in black. Mary and I quietly decided not to bother the General Committee with the problem and sent the players into town to buy the shoes. Apart from their feet, we made sure the rest of what they wore was sparkling white. Sunday's Well is a very different place now, and yet wonderfully the same. The changes that have come about for women are immense. Men and women are equal, and the club has benefited so much. My great-grandfather, who assumed the chair here in 1906, might well be horrified at the perception of women running his sanctuary. But for my grandmother, were she playing today, everything would have changed for the better. She could play at any time of the day. She could play year-round on floodlit courts. She would not be encumbered by long skirts and pinned-on hats. She would have the use of changing rooms that have just been refurbished. She would be allowed into the clubhouse and even into the bar to have a drink. She would have a place to park her car. Well, most of the time, anyway. She could captain the club and sit on the General Committee or even be a trustee. She could join Greg's, now Johnny's, ladies' mornings and have her coffee sitting looking at the river, even if the boats which were around in her time are long gone, and rejoice in the beautiful surroundings of her club. She could even play tennis for Ireland for the first time in her 70s, as Colleen Kennefic did this year. I think she would be rather pleased. Seriously, none of this would have been possible without the support of our men. John Walsh and Dave Hannam, who have done so much for this club. The chairman, some gone, some still with us, who had a vision for the future, and part of that vision was the inclusion of women as equal members. They no longer wanted just a men's club. Thank you to all the women who have made our club what it is today. And thank you to our staff who have supported these changes, starting with Terry and Kay Dunn, Michael and Teresa Spillane, Gus McKiernan, Lorraine O'Shea, Dara Quinn, David and Jackie now in the bar, and a special word of thanks to Lisa Lynch, who has overseen much of this change since the time of Liam O'Regan, and has been a quiet but powerful presence for a long time. So here we are, 2024, our 125th year. I wonder what changes will take place in the next 25, 50, or even 100 years. I think I will have to consult my granny. Wherever she is, she just might know. Thank you very much.